welcome everyone for Webforms for everyone. So yeah, I hope you're enjoying DrupalCon as much as I am. I'm meeting all these friends, old and new. And yeah, my main motivation for this talk is because I've been a lot through the experience of building websites with a very nice design, but the editor experience is left as an afterthought, especially for web forms. Like this is the web form we should design. It should be configurable and stuff, but the designers or no one knows very much how the backend will look. So yeah, and there is editors in the experience of the Drupal website. I'm a bit surprised that this is the only web form session in the whole DrupalCon. I had even doubts that web form was gonna be included in Drupal CMS, but I think it was in the prototype. So yeah, I guess web form is there in the current plans of Drupal CMS. So okay, so I'm Rodrigo Aguilera. I define myself as a backend developer. I've been involved in Drupal for more than 15 years. I've been talking about code quality, peer reviews, testing, Composer, and this is my first talk about Webform. I use Webform a lot in the projects. I did a little research on the projects that I currently manage, and they all have Webform installed. So yeah, this is a bit of my journey of providing solutions based on Webform, and I'm not an expert on it. I do my best. I try to contribute with the module when I find the opportunity. So yeah, you can find me in the social networks there. So this is the question I want to answer, and it might look that the Webform UI has some problems, but it actually has no problems. It's quite complete, but that becomes an issue for editors. Like it's a very big interface, and they need to focus on the work. And I hope you're here with me because you share a little bit of a curiosity on how we can improve a little bit the situation. I want to quick start the conversation at least. So we're gonna go from the full first at the full Webform UI and how we can deal with that situation where maybe the full Webform UI or much of its components need to be used. Then we're gonna move to strategies to make kind of web forms for editors so they can control the parts that we want to decide for them to control. I want to talk a little bit about variants. I hope some of you don't know about this feature in Webform because it's very useful for the next part, which is a module that I contributed called Webform Widget Handler, which is kind of the sweet spot for me for giving some control for editors over Webform. So yeah. This is the install of Drupal Webform. This is a Drupal 11 install. I installed from merge request Drupal 11. It's not completely 100% ready for Drupal 11, but everything that I tested for this session works, so it's pretty ready if you're worried about that. And as I said, it's not a bad interface. I mean, it has everything. I mean, everything I want to do with a form with Drupal. The problem is that when I saw these two editors, whether they are very tech savvy and they say, "Well, this is wonderful, I want it," or it's like very daunting for them and they want like some interface that is spot on what they want to do with the site. For a Drupal developer, this is, I mean, for me, it's very useful. I mean, sometimes I use Webform just for the sake of avoiding Form API from Drupal, and it works. And what I want to talk today is not a revolutionary solution. It's not like replace your current workflow with this. It's just depends on the use cases. But they all use Webform. So yeah, it's a bit of a study on who is going to wants to show forms on the front end on the web. You need to have a talk with them and their needs. And what I'm going to talk about also reflects a little bit on my journey as a developer, on the people I found that want to tailor the experience. So I summarize in some personas. There is a persona I'm not gonna talk about more, which is I'm the owner of the website. I make web forms and I commit them to the Git repository. And for me, the interface is fine. If I find problems in the web form interface, I know PHP and I can fix them upstream, things like that. So the experience of the Drupal developer who also is in control of all the web forms, no one else touches them, I'm not gonna talk about more. So the first is Wesley, which is a web form expert. Maybe they installed Drupal locally and they saw the interface of web form and they feel comfortable with it. But we are also the developer of the site, so we need to take into account some things like configuration, and we don't want them to touch the handlers that connect to the CRM, things like that. But he wants freedom, so we need to do a little negotiation there. Then we have Sergey, who has experience with Google Forms or HubSpot or SurveyMonkey. But yeah, the site is pretty integrated with Drupal because we have a theme. But maybe with Webform we can compete a little bit with these tools. Not completely, because they are tools that design for making forms online. But if we want all the power of Webform and its integrations, maybe we want to explore how to please a persona like Sergey. And then we have Mark for marketing. He doesn't want to see the web form interface. He knows about campaign IDs. He knows about amounts for donations. For I know he talks his business, but he wants the flexibility. He doesn't want to ask the developer every time there's a new campaign to create a new web form. So the first experience is for Wesley, who wants the full web form UI. But we as developers, we don't want to be called on a Saturday because Wesley broke something making a web form because he has the full interface. So we need to, it's mostly a conversation faced human to human, like manage who is responsible for breaking things, and you shouldn't touch some parts of the web form, but there is some things we can do. And also, we don't want to do bad deploys. Like web forms are configuration, and some stuff might be lost in the way. We need to strategize around that. So it's kind of a strategy I avoid. I prefer to give an experience that is more related to the business. Web form is pretty generic. It talks about forms. It doesn't talk about campaigns or anything. And since web forms are config, and if you have a sane deployment strategy where you have all the config in your repository and you deploy it every time, this is a bit of a conflict. So, very manual strategy. Like there is changes to web forms sometimes in the production environment, in the live environment, and you don't want to lose them. So every time you do a deploy, you download the database, synchronize it with your Git repository, exporting configuration, commit the changes, and everything's ready for deploy. Nothing is gonna be lost. This works for a few changes, but it's not gonna scale if there is many people editing the web forms. There's another tool that I use when I was kind of on this strategy is a module called config notify. Whenever some configuration changes on the live side, you have like an email or a Slack message. So at that time, you can manage the situation. Like, is a change of web form? Is a change that shouldn't be done? Maybe you can synchronize it with the repository for the next deploy. Things like that. Another module that deals with configuration is config ignore. You can decide that some web forms are created custom and these are ignored, are be treated like content. But the thing I don't like about this is that you lose control of it, those web forms. It's like if you want to deploy updates to content, you need to write hook updates, things like that. You cannot have changes in the YAML files and then deploy those because those are ignored by the configuration, by the config ignore module. Also, this custom prefix is something you have to agree with the person who is going to be creating the forms, or maybe you can enforce it with some hook insert when you're inserting a web form. But yeah, it's a valid strategy. I mean, someone is creating the web forms and you don't care, and you are not bothered by configuration changes. So in the lines of using the full web form UI, but helping a little bit with the business that you are dealing with in your Drupal site, you can give them web form templates, which is you build a web form and that's kind of the model for all the web forms subsequent for that type. The problem is the same with any templating strategy. Like once the template is cloned, you lose control of the clone. So no updates. They want new features. You add them to the template, but not to the clones of the template when they were created before. So yeah, my takeaways for using the full web form UI is that you have to manage configuration carefully, and it gives the user that knows web form and knows how to build HTML forms probably, you give them a lot of possibilities, but you give them a lot of room to break things also. So now we move on to the next persona, which is Sergey, who has experience with Google Forms. And for this, what I find useful is to use content entities. In my example, I use notes and paragraphs because it's what I found in many agencies that is very typically used. But yeah, it's about creating web forms at the same time as creating content entities. So you want to look at the web form UI and you spot the things that you want to give flexibility to your editors and you want to create Drupal fields for them. How? So you look at the web form elements. This will be like a text field, select choices, and you create paragraph types for them. This is a very simple example. I created a web form, a paragraph type called text field, and a paragraph type called checkbox. If they are required or not required, multi-choices. So yeah, for each of the parts of the interface you want to expose for the editor, create a Drupal field, and then with all this content, you want to write some custom code in PHP, kind of serialize it into a YAML, and create a web form structure. So whenever you're saving this node, you will create like a YAML structure under the hood in this fashion. I don't have a link to give you code for this strategy because it was kind of custom for the client. We ended up developing very advanced things like you use paragraphs to create pages for a wizard, and it at the end, it felt like it wasn't scaling. It's like we were exposing the web form UI too much, and it became very custom. So yeah, it can work for very simple strategies like want to do a form where you give the name and you choose some meals choices. But if you want to build complex forms, you end up replicating whatever is on web forms. So for that use case, I don't recommend it that much. It's good because you keep the structured data, the Drupal way of doing things. Developers are a lot in control on how you transform content, paragraphs, notes into a web form structure. Like maybe you want to add a lot of handlers in the process that handle the custom logic of the business. But yeah, it's kind of limited. You might end up with a lot of paragraphs, with a lot of fields, and it's not gonna scale. So yeah, then I wanna do a parenthesis and talk a bit about web form variants. It was developed in 2020. At the beginning, it was something like, let's add something that allows us to do A/B testing for web forms. So with variants, you can do segmentation, you can personalize the web form. And I feel it's a big topic, can have its own Drupal concession because you can do very advanced things with it. But I just want to give an intro because I want to use it in the next part. So this is how it looks at the beginning. You have a web form element, which is not user facing, which is called a variant. It's of type variant. You give it a name that has some meaning. In this screenshot, it's called mode. This is coming from the examples module in the inside web form. And these are the screenshots of the old Drupal administration theme. Is from when the feature was released, that it was still experimental. So when you add the element to your web form called variant, you have a new tab. Along with settings, you can create variants. As many variants as you need. They are linked to an element, as you can have in the same web form different variants per web form. That's if you want to get complicated, like I don't know, language variant, and if you want to simplify the web form, like simple version or complete version, things like that. When you go and edit one of the variants, you can modify settings of the web form. You can modify the elements. You can hide them, change the label, change a bit how they are displayed. You do it in YAML. It's not so friendly, so it's the variants to define are a bit for a site builder or a developer. And also you can change the configuration of the handlers. Things like the email that you're going to send. What's the ID of the campaign if you have a CRM system? So once you have configured the variants, how do you select them in the front end? You can enable a checkbox, which is gonna be a URL query parameter that maybe you can add to an email if you wanna send some variant to 50% of the people you're sending an email, and another variant to the other 50%, or the default variant. The variant can also be empty and no variations will happen on the web form. You can have it random, and whenever you collect the results for the submissions for that web form, you're gonna see what variant was chosen in each of the cases when it was random. And there is the concept of default submission data that you can give to a web form, and the variant will be chosen by the editor. This is the last part is the one that I'm interested, because I want the editor to select the variant so they can do customizations on the form. So the web form reference field, which is part of web form core, is not a simple entity reference. It also has some serialized data. This serialized data exposed on the field, if you've seen it, is just YAML. And in this YAML, you can also select the variants. Like, for example, this. This is how the widget looks. First, you choose the web form. That's the entity reference part of it. There is an option to open, close, schedule the form. And there in the bottom, it gives you the option to write YAML. In this YAML, in this case, is selecting the variant A, but you can also give defaults for the name or something like that. and this is the part that is more interesting for me, is that I wanted to make this better, like not a YAML. So I started exploring how I can deliver the experience to the editors here. So I looked into the code of Webform, and I discovered a way to replace this. By the way, I have I can show you a little bit about variants here. Yeah. So this is a page that I just is the page that comes with the standard profile. Here I added a Webform field. And I created a web form that is contact with variants. And I can say it's a contact form that ships with the web form module. This is the contact form with name, email, subject, message. But with the use, I created two variants. My field name is called variant. Let me make it bigger. Yeah, my field name is called variant, and one of the variants is called without name. So if I write here the YAML, now there is no name in the form because the variant defines that the name should be hidden. And I have a second variant, which is no name, no subject. And I can save it and just have the email and the message. This is the idea of variants. Okay, so yeah, this is what we just saw, but in a screenshot in the slides. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it like here. I have to move the mouse. Okay. So, the module that I wrote is called Webform Widget Handler. I'm not very good at choosing names for modules. I don't know. It's within the handler of a web form, you can alter the widget of a field. So Webform Widget Handler, whatever. So for my exploration on how I was going to replace that YAML, I noticed the open, close, and schedule. So when I was selecting different web forms, sometimes there was a message there, like if the web form is closed already, is selected, there is a message. Let me show you actually. So if I edit here, there is no message here, but for example, I close this example web form variant segments, and since it's closed, it's giving me a warning, and I thought like, maybe I can hook in there. And I explore a bit the code, and it seems like in the widget, you can, for different types of web form, you can show information there. So what this new module that I wrote provides is a new widget, which is select list with handler control. So you write new handlers whenever there is a handler that is the creation of the handler is not special. This is just a custom handler. This is the example handler that comes with the module with these annotations. And the new part is a new method. The handlers that have this method, form element field widget, which has many parameters, so you can get the context. But basically what you want to return and modify is the element. This is kind of the way that you get the default data. I mean, because there might be some personalizations already, like the default values of the form. And here I'm creating like a select form, so the variant is not a YAML anymore. It will be a select with these two variants that I created without name nor subject. You can look at the example. There's a bit more like boilerplate code, but basically you create an element and return it. It's a bit weird. The naming is a status message, but that's how it's done, because this in the Webform core module is a container that is its only purpose was to show status messages, but I discovered that you can display more and you can even have a form there. So I propose to change it. Changing things in Webform is a bit complicated. So yeah. So when I have a custom handler that has this code, this little YAML, I transform it into a select box, which is a bit nicer. And from here, your form API skills apply. It's not only for variants. Variants are a useful way of writing just YAML and no code. But Webform allows for elements that are not user-facing, that are just values. That value can be your bucket for storing whatever configuration the editor wants to save for a Webform, and gives a lot of freedom to write forms there that can use States API. As everything you can do in a form, basically. One of my ideas that I haven't developed yet is to define a form, a web form that configures another web form. And I was thinking about this meme because it was getting a little bit of inception. Like, I will be creating a web form to configure another web form. I think I'm going crazy. So, what this new module, just giving ideas of things that I use it for, because my context is that I work for a lot of NGOs, so they want to modify the donation amounts for each of the web forms, but they don't want to change or duplicate the web form at all. They want to redirect after the web form is complete to different pages to give them different kind of thank you. They want to simplify the web form, hiding fields, or some fields shouldn't be mandatory. For example, in Spain, we have second surname, and in other countries, they don't have. And yeah, you can remember that with a variant or in a handler, actually, you can change many aspects of a web form. You can change the configuration of who's receiving the email with the web form results. You can change the campaign ID that is going to be sent to the CRM. So yeah, at the beginning, I was talking about Mark, who is in marketing and who only cares about campaign IDs. And this way, by embedding a little form for configuring the web form, we can deliver to him an experience that is more talks in his language whenever he's logging into Drupal and changing configuration there. So yeah, I think of this little YAML and variants as kind of a thing that is modifying web forms at runtime, because you have the configuration, the web forms as configurations in the site. You can build very advanced web forms, and then you modify them when you're displaying them to the user. Okay. Yeah, I'm about to finish. So, for this new module, I don't know. I kind of released it as it was. In production, it was working for us. The kind of boilerplate, I don't like it that much. So I wanna simplify code, upstreaming parts of it, because if the widget, the field widget for Webform, is more separated into methods, I can simplify my code. I'm copying a lot of code from Webform. So yeah, it's some proposals that I have to make upstream. And yeah, like I was talking before, like using Webforms instead of the form API to define how you're going to configure the web form. But maybe that's a bit crazy. So yeah, and then the code is there. Patches are welcome. Like the example is very very needed. If you don't follow the example, you're gonna be pretty lost on how to configure a web form that has a handler that can replace the YAML. And yeah, that's it for web form widget handler. So what I hope you took a bit from this talk is like there is different use cases, strategies to give them all the flexibility of web form, but just the parts that are relevant for Drupal editors. And there is a lot of unexplored paths, flexibility, and yeah, all this flexibility gives you the power to give experiences that matter to editors. And with that said, I want to thank Imbra. That was the company that I was working with when I developed the module. They give the time. And Suntory is my current company, Spirits, and they give me the time to be here in Barcelona. So I want to thank them all. I want to thank the sponsors, volunteers, everyone involved, and having a great DrupalCon. And yeah, I want to open the floor for questions. And the first thing, I have a question for myself because I saw the Dries note yesterday, and he was showcasing the Drupal AI module, and I saw it had an agent for web forms. Haven't explored it yet, but might be an alternative for this. Like you give your editor a chatbot that allows them to build a web form that they like with the configuration that they want. So yeah, it's something that I haven't explored yet. So please use the microphone there if you want to. And yeah, also if you've been in that situation, like you wanted to give the control of web forms to the users, I'm also open for that, and you can find me in the hallway. Okay. No.